I'm ready, and I'm really ready for anything. So,
Okay, good. I know we're a good pair that way.
right.
Okay, well, welcome to Be the Glitter, where we talk about tough topics with giggles and leave inspiration that sticks.
That's beautiful, right? This is how we do it.
This is
Hmm.
how we do it. And that's why you are the perfect guest. You are sparkling and shining and sending so much love and inspiration out there
Right.
all day, every day. And I sometimes don't even know how you do it, but I love how you're so raw and honest and open. You're vulnerable. So, without any further ado, I would love it for you to introduce yourself as the goddess you are, how you prefer to be known.
And to address part of what you were just saying, the phrasing I've learned to use that makes sense to me is we exist in hell, right? We exist in hell, but we live in community, right? We don't have to live in that hell that they want to make for us. We can come together and live in celebration. It doesn't mean ignore, it doesn't mean erase, it doesn't mean turn away, but it means all the people, right, that are in love to just keep falling in love each day in all the ways that we do. Oof, oof. So,
See, that's what I love about you.
right.
You have this beautiful way of talking about falling in love. So
Mhm.
you are like
Yes.
a priestess, goddess, street minister. Like, could you please do a good job
So,
of
yes.
help me better introduce you?
So I am a preacher. I am part of the ELCA Lutheran tradition. I'm on the very fringe of it, and sort of whether they keep accepting me or not is a whole question. But I work at a church, preach every other week. I am a priestess because I reclaim the feminine from the mass erasure, right, that's been done for so long. Um, I speak to lift all the ways of faith because, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
Yes, you are.
because fuck the idea that there's only one way, as if there were only one way. No, no. I learned so much from pagan, from Buddhist. I learned so much from Muslim. I learned so much from Jewish. I learned so much from the multitude of ways of living in this world.
Mhm.
So yes, I am all of that. I also have been performing burlesque striptease. Um, I challenge and I push at the way patriarchy has subverted. Patriarchy has subverted faith. Patriarchy has subverted life. If we reclaim women and reclaim the spaces that are um, loved and set in beauty, and that's not an anti-man message,
Mhm.
right? Because so many men have been hurt. But the way to fixing it is not to say hashtag not all men. The way to fixing it is to say, let's find the women in our lives, listen to women, uplift the women, not argue, not fuss, be present, pay attention, pay attention. I was given an omen
Mhm.
of a crow recently, right?
Oh
Appeared on my
yeah.
window. So weird, right? Just this sort of image. And the crow, for me, is the image of paying attention, of being in community. So that's the message. That's the life that we can live together. That's how we make heaven here now.
And I could be wrong. I didn't study this ahead of our podcast, but I I also think of Crow as like the messenger in between worlds and realms.
I've heard that too.
It's
I
very
think,
powerful,
right.
mystical. Hmm.
And there's no wrong in any of it, right? And there
No.
are very personal ways of understanding when we see omens, when we see, for me, I talk about as a Christian, I think about the way the spirit works, right? The idea of it was from a woman, a person, I'm sorry, person, non-binary, he told me about a Sufi phrasing from the Quran, which is that wherever you look, there is the face of God. Wherever you
Hmm.
look, there's the face of God. Not an old man, right? Not some old man,
Yeah.
not male at all, but the weeds growing up from the sidewalk. The weeds growing up from the sidewalk are the face
Yeah.
of God, right? The cracked, the broken, the joyful, the flower, the wheat, the brown and the gray and the black, as well as all of the stunning mountains and oceans and all of it. And so let's just fall in love again and again. I keep coming back to falling in love because that's the central message, right? Of the
Yeah.
faith I'm in is to fall in love, even though
And,
it's not what actually happens, but in how it's been subverted by patriarchy. But
well, and that's the interesting thing too, right? Because I think, um, that opened my mind so much in, oh, I don't even remember if it was post-colonial literature or if it was a sociology class, but I was reading Rayanne Eisler. She's a Jewish feminist
hmm
anthropologist. Like,
hmm
so cool. And at the time, one of her new books, I'm aging myself now when you look it up, um, was The Chalice and the Blade. And so she's talking
Yes.
about these goddess worshiping
Mhm.
societies and the patriarchal nomadic societies that were using aggression and hate and violence as a way
Right.
to take over these more peaceful
hmm
matriarchal societies and rewriting their oral history and everything. And, um, and it's just so interesting to me to think about that there is a way, and there was a way in which being spiritual meant love
Right.
and embracing the mystery of life and death. A lot of
Right.
a lot of embracing mystery of life, and to think that love can be actually the default instead of aggression and hate.
Right.
And in this latest podcast with Amelia Michael, they talk about how, there people do believe that there are just two different modes to live in. You're either living out of love or you're living out of hate. And there is a choice, but it's
Right.
easier for some to live out of one or the other. So I love that's what I love about your message,
hmm
because you are talking about there is choice. There are mindset
Right.
shifts to be made, but also there's relearning and unlearning to be done about what spirituality means, even what the Bible teaches.
Right.
Do you mind talking a little bit about how I lo- I'll give you two things that I love what you talk about. I love how you talk about the different ways of prayer, that
Yes.
prayer can be conceived very differently and
Right.
practiced differently than maybe what some people say. And I love how you talk about um, different um, feminists or feminism, feminine role models in the Bible
Right.
that aren't spoken about very much.
Yes. Yes. Or erased in so many ways, or
Mm-hmm.
minimized into only a role.
Right.
But yeah, let's start with prayer. Okay. Um, because it was not my goal to be Christian. Right. I'd stayed out of it for decades. I didn't want anything part of it. I hear all the ways that Christianity is a problem because it is. And if you're listening to this and you feel the pain of Christianity, then stay away, right? Even if it means that you don't want to listen to me because you need to protect yourself. But for me, I can't help but be who I am any more than I can help being trans, than being a woman, than being queer, than being lesbian. I can't help any of it. And so I look to see. And the benefit I have is that I can look back to the actual text and say, well, what does the text say? Does it say what people have subverted it to mean? And the answer is no, it doesn't. And you don't have to read it. You don't have to take my word for it. You might find your own way, whether it's Buddhist or pagan, whether it's Wiccan. But when it comes to prayer, I think too often the prayer sounds like kneeling at the bedside, right? Well, you do that in church. You have to start it in this formal way, dear, whatever, right? It's like, no, no, no. Wherever we look, there's the face of God. When I pray, I'm doing laundry. Laundry is the prayer. right? I take the time when I'm folding the clothes. I feel the fabric. I listen to the sounds of some of the fabrics. I pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm not in a hurry. I let myself be in that moment. And in that moment, I think about a friend who's struggling, or I think about my own life, or I think about the world, whatever it might be. And that's the prayer. That right there, right? Just that. It doesn't need anything more than that. And maybe that doesn't sound good to you because you feel like um, laundry is a chore. So a friend of mine who's Satanist, right? We have great conversations because fuck that there's any one right way.
Yeah.
And they talked about their doing spell, right? Doing magic by making tea. And that was absolutely the same way I think about a prayer. When you make your tea, say you make it in the afternoon, which is, 'cause I'm, stereotype, make tea, in the afternoon, whatever. So I
That's
make my
what
tea,
this is
right?
right here.
See? And I listened to them and I thought that's exactly how I would do it too. And so I've taken on their practice as my prayer, what they would call a spell of you start the water boiling, you feel the heat of the pot, you start to steep the leaves, you smell the scent. Your intention is there. It's not, oh, I'm playing a game of Sudoku, or I'm not reading quickly the news and doom scrolling. I'm not checking in with a friend. I'm actually paying attention to every moment that I'm doing right now. And that's prayer.
Yeah. I think of what you're saying as the difference between um, what I considered church at one point was very
Right.
ritualistic in
Right.
a not I shouldn't say that word. Ritualistic is great, and I like that
Right.
about the making of the tea and
Hmm.
certain things that you're talking about. Ritual is wonderful, especially when it's mindful. I think the
Right.
difference is when you're simply following orders in almost like a boot camp military way, and there
Right.
is no mindfulness to it. You're just following orders.
Hmm.
So that's what I love about what you're talking about. Sure, you can mindlessly do laundry. That's not prayer. If you choose to be mindful and you choose to be present in the
Right.
moment and having the intention of making it almost like a sacred experience, that
Yes.
can
Right.
be prayer, right? Is that the
Right. That's
difference?
exactly it. And, like one of the things I talk to people about, because so many Christians will come after me, right? And they'll say, well, you can't just say that because the Bible this or the Bible that. And it's like, well, sure, I can argue Bible to you because I've read it. And I can see where you're right or wrong. But instead of that, why don't we actually listen to God now? The divine now, the spirit now, the goddess now, right? Because do we really think, however we define the divine, stopped talking 2,000 years ago? That the Bible is a book of dogma, that any of the ancient texts are just dogmas and rules instead of conversations. It's all a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
In my tradition, they say wherever two of us are gathered, there is God, right? So why don't we believe that? Why don't we act like that? Um, and so maybe it's walking and you hear the wind in the trees, or you notice the moss on the branch, or you dig in the soil and the decay and growth and the prayer of life at your
Mm-hmm.
fingertips, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And honoring it.
and
You know,
honoring it. Yes.
my partner is such a mushroom nerd. And so when we go on these hikes and these forays, and we do discover certain mushrooms, and maybe some of them are new. There's a
Right.
fungus that is surprising or mysterious to us. And
Right.
so there's reverence for
Right.
now. It takes a lot of observation, but also you have to really get into the present moment. Like, okay, hold on. It is this temperature, this time of year.
Right.
We're by these trees. We've got this kind of situation going on around here. What else is
Right.
growing here? And then you get to choose whether or not you actually even pluck the mushroom or not.
Right.
and that's basically like picking an apple from what I understand. You're not killing the tree by picking an apple,
Right.
but it, it to me that can be such an amazing sacred experience. The smells, the colors, the textures, and just the connection that you feel, because not only do you feel connected to the forest or whatever environment you're in at the time, but now you're realizing how connected this mushroom is to the trees and to literally the earth. And sometimes there's even other symbiotic or parasitic relationships going on between different mushrooms, insects, the trees. I mean, it is fascinating. So even
Right.
just by studying mushrooms, it can be an entire religion in itself.
It's
Really.
stunning, right?
It
Um,
really is.
and every faith I've encountered, every faith, and this includes atheist and agnostic, the people who tune into it as a celebration,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're the ones who are hearing whatever the message is that's being given to them or that they're finding or they're creating. It just doesn't fucking matter how we define it, right? Um, it's the folks who are defining their world as opposed to others, right? And that's where I see far too many Christians oppose. They define being Christian as, well, we're not that, right? Well, why not? Why are you seeing yourself in a negative? See yourself in the positive, see yourself in the joyful, right?
Well, and and it's one thing to also recognize differences.
Yes, that's
It's
important. You're
another
right.
thing to judge people on them.
Yes, right. Sorry, I
If,
keep shifting around here,
that's okay. Movement is really important. That's why I stand during mine.
right?
So I love all of this, and I would love for you to. I loved your TikToks where you're talking about how you see
Right,
passages of the Bible and
right,
your not only interpretation, but literally what it says and your
right.
explanation as to what story is being told.
Hmm.
Um, do you mind talking a little bit about that?
You bet, you bet. Um, when I look, I try and see where women are, right? And the thing about the Gospels, the thing about the stories of Jesus is women are everywhere. The men who wrote and controlled it minimized
Zero.
the women, but the women are still there. And there's a lot of queerness. And so let me give you, I'm trying to think, like I'm right now, I'm talking about Ruth and Naomi in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament. Um, and I think of them as lesbians. There's a beautiful passage where Ruth speaks to Naomi. And Naomi is the mother-in-law, Ruth is the daughter-in-law, but not blood relations, different time. You didn't get married for romance, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the two women are walking back to Naomi's homeland, Bethlehem, I think. And Naomi is telling Ruth, you should go. You should go back to the place we just were, where you were born and raised. And Ruth says, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. And may God do such and so to me and more beside, if even death should part us. And that passage is used as a love song in cishet marriages, but the churches refuse to understand it as a love between two women. Or if they say, well, it's love, but it's not romantic. It's like, well, why not? Why not?
Right.
Why do we
Why
presume
not?
not? Right? And they'll
It's
say, well, you
beautiful
can't,
love.
right? And they'll say, well, you can't put that on it because we don't know. It's like, well, you don't know their cishet either, right? But you're willing to put that on it, right? There's a beautiful passage because Naomi, the mother-in-law, I'm potentially the older person, is teaching Ruth how to seduce a man, Boaz, in the relationship, right? Nothing about love. She teaches Ruth how to go in to Boaz's room and stroke his penis. The language that uses feet, right? To essentially, well, I forget the wording about his feet, but feet is such a metaphor, right? As if it's like, no, she's teaching him to stroke his penis. So she's teaching Naomi, and she teaches not because Ruth is in love. Naomi is teaching not because Ruth is looking for love from a man, but because that's how you gain economic security.
Wow.
And those times where, and it's named, this is for economic security in the Bible, right? Not for love. That's not even a consideration. So why do we keep assuming just because later Ruth and Boaz get married that that's, that he's not just a beard essentially, right? Why do we
Right.
have to presume instead of actually reading what's there in the text, right? Read what's in the text, and the text says love for Ruth and Naomi. The text says security for the others. So I think of like, oh, there's something beautiful about the disciples in the Bible because we get stuck on the idea of 12 disciples, which if you actually read, you'll see there's so many more in the Bible. And it'll be like one of the passages will be like the disciples and Susanna and Joanna and Mary Magdalene were walking with. So what? They're just camp followers, right? What are we supposed to assume here? No, they're disciples too. Um, Mary and Martha, the two women who are often, if you're a Christian, you know this story, but very likely they were disciples who ran a home for people who were sick, like ailing in a time, like a hospital, but not wouldn't have been called that. There's a line that says Mary was kneeling at the feet of Jesus. That same imagery, kneeling at the feet of, is how Paul is described, and he's one of the main letter writers in the Bible, right? Paul is described as sitting at the feet of Gamaliel. It's discipleship. Kneeling at the feet of his discipleship. That means she's a disciple, that she's studying, not that she's literally sitting there on her knees at the feet of, right? So you have to actually pay attention. And you
Hmm.
see women everywhere, everywhere lifted in the writings, in ministry, challenging social norms again and again throughout the stories. And so, you have Jael running the spike through a man's head in retribution. You have Deborah is one of the judges before Israel had kings, they had judges. And she's named as Deborah of Lapido, right? And so that's been interpreted by men as, oh, wife of this man named Lapido, which is a name that never shows up anywhere else.
Hmm.
That is not a male name. It's never in anywhere else in any of the texts. But it can be translated when you actually read it as torches or fire.
Oh,
So
interesting.
now, instead of saying, oh, well, none of the other judges, the men are referred to in terms of their relationship, but she must only be referred to in terms of a husband. That's never mentioned anywhere. No, this is Deborah, the judge, woman of fire, right? Fiery woman, active woman, right? So let's start
Yeah,
paying attention. Oh, oh.
it's so cool. And I want to say, I'll have to do some more research, but it is believed that a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, um, because certain texts in the Bible were written with so much matriarchal and feminist messages, and so much more power to women. They were ripped out of the Bible, rewritten, and monks had actually taken those passages and hid them away so they wouldn't be
Mhm.
completely destroyed and hopefully discovered later. Now, who knows, if any of that is true
Right.
or if they've ever been discovered, if they're destroyed, whatever. But
Hmm.
um, I wouldn't be surprised. Like,
Yeah.
a book as old as the Bible has been rewritten how many times?
Right.
Um,
But even when you
why?
go back, right, to the Greek, and they are able to go back to earlier passages where, like, some of the versions have diverged quite, like King James has almost subverted so much of the Bible from the Greek. But even going back there, the scholars who actually read in the Greek, that's fascinating. I have a small amount of Greek, right? And you can actually see which writers were schooled and capable of writing and which ones this was a foreign language for. But it all gets lost in the English translation because it translates into standard English.
Okay.
Um, but a for instance is when they've looked at all the letters that are said to be written by Paul, which is like half the Bible, right? Um, and what they find is some of them are clear. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a jet going overhead right now. That's
I
making it
didn't hear
hard to
it.
hear. Okay. Um, that some are clearly written by Paul, and you can tell by actually reading in the Greek his style. Others are so clearly not written by Paul, but were imitators, which was a common way to learn how to write back then, is you imitate somebody.
Mhm.
So, for instance, the letter to Timothy is widely understood to be an imitator and not actually Paul. And for a couple reasons, because when you actually read the letters that Paul wrote, they lift women all the time, right?
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
lift kind of a queer understanding of the world that's very centered on justice, um, again and again. But you come across so many Christians will lean into this one passage from the letter to Timothy that they say is written by Paul that's very much against women being in leadership. And they ignore all the other places that women are in leadership. The deacon, um, I can't remember her name now, Phoebe, the disciple, Tabitha, the way that women are named as disciples in ministry leaders, Lydia from, where was it in Greece? I can't remember. Dyer of purple cloths, right? So many women
Yeah.
again and again. So let's stop erasing. Let's stop erasing. Oh, and
And
name all the ways. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and quit making women subservient.
Right, right.
That's where I get caught gasping in some like wedding that
Mhm.
I have gone to or something. Like I'll audibly gasp when somebody is like, you know, just agreeing to be completely subservient to their man. And I'm just like,
Right,
what?
right. Like if you're in like a dom slave kink experience, you go, you do you, right? But
Sure. Right.
but this is claiming normativity in relationship that women should always be the lesser. It's like, no, that's not it. Let's not do that. So I
No.
mean the whole
I mean,
story from the very beginning with Eve and Adam has been subverted because in the original text, the earth being Adam, the earth being the human, right? Adam just means that, earth being or human. Adam is split in two, not a woman dragged out of a man, but the original non-binary all gender being is split to be two ends of that binary, which would encompass the entirety of the spectrum, right?
right.
So,
Yes. And oh gosh, there's so much. There's so much we can go.
right.
There's so many ways
Well,
we can go from here. Like, I also love how you talk about intimacy and
yes.
how important that is and how beautiful that is. That in itself can be prayer. And um and the fear of embracing intimacy. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that because some things that have been a very common theme in Be the Glitter is,
Right.
we've got to learn how to take care of ourselves and love ourselves if we're going to love others.
Mhm.
And in some ways, a lot of my guests think that maybe that's where some of the hatred and the aggression that they see is coming from, that there's already an insecurity from people who are angry at themselves for not being able to embrace their authenticity. And it's easier to
Mhm.
project their hatred for
Right.
themselves onto somebody else. But now when we come to intimacy and sex, we're stepping into yet an entirely other, surprisingly controversial topic, right?
Well, one of the things I point out when I talk about intimacy is I'll start talking about intimacy and then I'll pause and say, Did you think I was talking about sex? Right? Is that all that you think of intimacy as? Like my most intimate moments are with a dear friend that we don't even have physical intimacy, let alone sexual. We have the deepest emotional intimacy I've ever encountered. I would argue that the vast majority of women are poly, right, in emotional intimacy.
Hmm.
Because yes, there are amazing men. Hashtag not all men, I get all of it. And especially the trans men I know often have a really good touch. Not always, not always, and there are
Yeah.
cis men who get it, but the emotional literacy, so many women in cishet relationships aren't getting it. They aren't getting emotional intimacy from their husbands. Social intimacy, intellectual intimacy, the
So
physical
important.
versus the sexual, right? The physical intimacy of holding hands, of leaning in, cuddling doesn't have to always be sex, right? And even when it's sex, that's not wrong. There's no wrong in anything. Where the wrong is if you're in a relationship with one person and you don't tell them about your other intimacies. The only times I've committed adultery are when I was telling myself sitting down and talking with another woman wasn't the issue. That's not adultery. We were sharing our hearts. We were having deep conversations. And then I would go home and just say, oh, yeah, I was out with a friend. Uh-uh. No, no, right? I committed adultery with a bottle back in the day because I was tired after work and I'd stop at a local bar and have a whiskey. And that turned into a double and then the two doubles. And I'm big, so I don't get drunk back then, right? But I didn't tell my wife. All she got was that I was just tired. Well, that's just Via-Etta from the workday. No, it's a lie. I brought a lie into the relationship, right? That's what that is. Sex done honestly, truly, in intimacy, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, intellectual intimacy, social intimacy, all the ways, practical intimacy that we can be in touch with each other and also with ourselves. When's the
Hmm.
last time you sat down with yourself thinking about something important and gave yourself the grace to say, yes, this is interesting what I'm thinking, the intellectual intimacy with ourself,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
emotional intimacy to be able to sit down and just let ourselves cry or laugh or wonder, right? And yes, the
Hmm.
sexual intimacy of lovely, lovely time playing with ourselves, not worrying about the end, right? That's such a I feel that's such a cishet male thing to worry about the explosion at the end. Explosions at the end are lovely. That's not the whole thing. The touch, right, of ourselves to
Right.
ourselves. Oh, we
And
just keep
consent.
and
I
consent, right?
consent, 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 consent. And it's just so
Hmm.
interesting how that just the concept of consent can be jarring to some people. And it's
Right,
like,
right,
okay, sit with that for a moment. Like, have
right,
yourself a nice conversation about why consent is an uncomfortable subject and asking for consent is uncomfortable because that should be top priority and default.
right.
Um,
One
Safety
of
is
the oh,
sexy, you know?
right, consent is sexy. One
Yeah,
of the ways, because as I've entered polyam world, right, polyamorous world,
yeah.
that I've been criticized by people in my faith and others is like, well, what's your wife think? It's like, well, we talk, right? We talked a year and a half. We have deep, deep, loving conversations, but they're not hearing it because what they hear is a stereotype of the way people enter relationships that's coercion. They think, oh, well, she agreed, but it's coercion, right? Coercion is not consent. Consent is stunning, right? If you're trying to convince somebody of something and they agree, maybe, right? But pay attention. Pay attention. Was that actual consent? Or did they agree because they just want to be done with the conversation? Actually have the conversation. Keep coming back to the conversation. Sit down and talk, truly talk and listen. How many of us truly listen? That's the thing. It's stunning. Just, oh,
And
oh.
I'm always interested that people, I, it's so interesting that people feel like they can enter a conversation with pretend curiosity, but it's actually judgment. They've already decided that whatever it
Yeah.
is you're doing is wrong, and they're not listening with empathy or an open mind. Instead, they are listening with the intent to just judge you more and
Right.
superimpose their own judgments or narrow-minded ideas. When
Hmm.
if we can truly enter conversations with true curiosity and an open mind, we can learn something. We can learn something about consent and what how beautiful that is, and what how that opens up even our concept of what love really means. And then we can learn about compersion. And that is a
Right.
word that so many people don't even know, don't understand,
Hmm.
and have probably never I should say never, but probably, aren't practicing on purpose. So maybe you even have some thoughts on compersion. Maybe I just threw something at you.
I've heard the word, but I don't feel
Uh-huh.
confident enough to speak on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think where where we can embrace this concept is actually being truthfully grateful and happy for somebody else's happiness with somebody
That's
else.
it. That's it. That's it.
So if, in a polyamorous relationship,
Hmm.
you know that this beautiful person who is now dating your partner, yeah, and you can find compersion for how well they get along and what a great
Right.
time they have together.
Right.
And you know what? Usually doing something together that you're grateful that they get to do that thing because you do other things with your partner. And so we get to, complete a package of love and needs and desires and
Hmm.
wants that it might be difficult for just two people to do in a monogamous relationship.
Right.
So, but it can take practice. Jealousy
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
a is it's difficult, right? But if you
Right.
can learn to love yourself
Mm.
enough to love the happiness for others
Right.
instead of
Right.
be jealous of the happiness of
Hmm.
others, wow,
Right.
life gets gorgeous. Life just
Doesn't
gets
it?
gorgeous. Yes.
Doesn't it? Oh. And it's like the thing that I noted, because part of my heart is monogamous. It was just situations have arisen that have put me into this other space. But there's the thing about polyamorous, it really works to get rid of ownership. You know, I don't own anybody. I get to be part of their lives. And that's what's so amazing, right?
Yeah.
Let's let people be part of each other's lives in all the ways we can. And let's stop making sex the paramount intimacy. How about
Right.
if somebody mentioned intimacy and the first question was, oh, well, which kind? Right? Instead of just
Yes.
presuming sex, right?
Yes.
Because I am absolutely intimate with dear friends who I've never had sex with.
Hmm.
But if I have sex with them, does that make me different, right? Where's
Hmm.
our line? Where do we worry about it? And why are we worried about it when really it's what we're talking about, the people involved in true relationship, compersion, right? True
Hmm.
consensual relationship, true conversations. Oof, 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 oof. So good.
Life can get so juicy and delicious.
Right? Oh, I love it. Juicy and delicious. Mm-mm-mm.
So, how did you choose this beautiful life, or how did this life choose you, I should say? Because you talk about how you are finally your authentic self
Mhm.
and you're just being true to who you are and you can't help it. Um,
Excellent.
but let's face it, like we get to choose to be authentic. We can
Right,
choose to be inauthentic and we can choose to
right.
be authentic. That's something we do get control over. So, how did you choose this authentic life? Or maybe you see it as, how did this authentic life choose you?
So one of the sort of segueing a little bit and then coming back. One of the things I've come to fully realize is how much anger I carry, right?
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
talk about it too much, but I carry a lot of anger. My anger expresses, when it expresses around other people, it expresses as shortness, as a um, turning away, which I don't
Hmm.
like, right? And so I'm
Hmm.
working on not judging myself, but working on it. But I know where that comes from. I spent half a century, right? I'm a 60-year-old woman. I love being 60. I love being who I am, right? Um, I spent half a century hiding my entire existence, thinking I had to hide my entire existence, that that was the way life was supposed to be, and that I was wrong to think any other thought. So when I came out, I was 55? No, 54, 54, because I've been out 6
54.
years.
Okay.
Um, that changed everything, but it didn't change everything overnight, because I still carried and still carry half a century's worth of erasure of myself. So it's probably 2.5, maybe 3 years before I started fully coming to myself as a fully sexual being, as a fully realized human in the many ways that I can be. And I still keep learning and I still keep finding ways forward. And what's changed for me is coming out and being the woman that I am
Excuse me.
has given me access to spaces with women who can also be there with me, right? I get to sit with friends who are women and talk and share and be present in all the ways that we can be present with each other in a way that I didn't have before. People say, well, I know men who can do that. Well, sure, I wasn't a man, I was a woman. I was always the girl growing into a woman, hiding under the mask of the man. I describe myself as the girl who had to hide in the boys' locker room, right? The question I'll often ask people and anybody watching this, do I come off as shy, right? Do I come off as a quiet person? Oh, I was. I wore shy and quiet as my armor. That was my mask. That's how
Yeah.
people would have described the young me. Um, so but I get to be me in this world. I was shown and got to follow this path, but it took a half a century.
Hmm.
And the thing that I keep doing by being present in the world, and this isn't on anyone else. I spent half a century hiding because I had to for safety too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you're wondering whether you can come out and it's not feeling safe, then do what you need to do to feel safe, right?
Hmm.
But for me, being out and being present and not passing as a cisgender woman, right? There's a privilege in not passing. There's danger, right? I'm not going to
Hmm.
minimize that. I run into it quite often. But the privilege is I get seen as a woman who brings joy and celebration into a space. And people see me. And I've had so many people come to me and say, hey, I felt like I could be me for the first time. Right?
Yeah.
And it takes one person saying that, and I've done the mission, right?
Yeah.
I've served a purpose in this world. Oh,
Hmm.
oh.
It's
So,
so good. And you're out on the streets
mhm.
spreading the word of love.
Spreading the word of love, right? Non-judgmental, being present. The language from the Bible, where Jesus says the two commandments, says of these are the two commandments: love God with all your heart, which if we understand the face of God, right, everywhere we look is the face of God, then that's, if you're paying attention and loving and walking in nature and being with people, then you're doing that. Whether you call
Hmm.
it God or divine or whatever is, again, who the
Hmm.
fuck cares the names, right? That we
Yeah.
put on things that are different from ourselves. Let's listen to the names they give themselves. You know, the sound of the wind is the name of the wind. I can't speak that name, but I can hear it.
Mhm.
And then to love your neighbor as yourself. The change I put is in the phrasing. Because what if instead of we saying love your neighbor, we say fall in love? Fall in love with your neighbor as you fall in love with yourself, that double commandment. Because you talked earlier, the necessity of finding a way. I hear so many people say, well, I don't really love myself. And I get it. But how do you fall in love with yourself? How do you
Yeah.
take time with intimacy with yourself in all
And
the
why not?
ways? And why not?
Why
Right?
not love yourself? You've got
Why
this
not?
life to live. It
Mm,
feels so much better to choose love than to choose hate. It
it
just
really
does.
does. It does.
And you just have to try it.
Right?
You just
And
have to
it's,
keep practicing.
and there's a lot of pushback on that, like um, I've heard like there was a movement among some men to call their friends and say goodnight to them. Well, how nice is that, right? How
Yeah,
sweet.
super sweet.
I've lived for so long in the company of men who would have been absolutely freaked out because they're so worried. Are they man enough? Are they being seen this way or that way? But if you're falling in love, like when I fall in love, I want to know everything.
Yeah.
I want to be present in every way. And
Mhm.
so if you're worried that you're going to seem gay for saying that you love your friend, that you call them and say goodnight, well, then be fucking gay. Because if you want to know what heaven's like, go to a pride fest where people actually care and love each other, right?
Right.
Oh,
And what's wrong with asking questions? Right? Like,
right?
what does it take for somebody to practice pausing before they judge somebody
Mhm. Yes.
and instead change their mindset, intention, and language, both body language and energy language and verbal language, written language, to show up with curiosity and kindness instead? Have you been witnessing any of that? Somebody who may have shifted from the judgment to curiosity and kindness and start practicing that instead?
Um, I do see it. I see it in so many ways. I've seen like members of my church who are all, they're good people. They're not right, and they're doing good work. And then sometimes people will say, I never thought of it like that, right?
Mhm.
And they start seeing things differently. I see it from, I was having a conversation with a person who expressed being an atheist only in terms of all the bad things about Christianity. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, she and I could go on forever about all the bad things of Christianity, but
yeah,
where's your love? And I
yeah.
asked that question, where do you find joy in this? Not as a negative, not as a gotcha, right? But as an honest question. And they thought about it and they said, oh, they never quite thought of it that way. So
Hmm.
now they're thinking about it and they talked about, shoot, it had something to do, I think, with taking a walk, right? And just being fully present. So you don't need
Hmm.
God, right? You don't need to believe in God to be fully present.
Right.
Um, I don't care. Like I may be completely wrong in my belief. That's not the point. I don't care, right?
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
not here to judge anybody, right? Let's just find those things that are beautiful in the
Hmm.
world where we find the peace, where we make tea or fold laundry or take a walk or just breathe or sit and laugh with friends, all of it. And I see people doing that. And I have people write to me on my social media. I had a woman come to me at my farmers market chaplaincy, the queer chaplaincy down at the farmers market, crying because she had never been freed from the idea that for all her life she'd been taught that you're either Christian or you're not. And if you're not, you're going to go to hell. And if you try and talk to anybody about it, they're going to tell you that. Um, And she heard me talking and saying, no, no, believe how you do. And if listening to me feels like harm to you, then don't listen to me. Listen to yourself. Listen to how you experience life and joy and love. And that
Mhm.
meant something to her. And she heard it, right, in the way that stunned me. And now I grow and I learn from that conversation, because if you teach and you're not changed in the teaching, then you're not teaching.
Right.
If you love
Yeah.
and you're not changed in that, it's all of it. We embrace change when we actually engage.
hmm And I think that's the difference between sharing and sermon,
Yes, yes.
you know? And I was just going to ask another question. It was um, about different beliefs. Like, for example, I was in a support group where, a lot of the things that we were supposed to read out loud, God, 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 God. And I just
Mhm.
changed it to goddess when I read it.
Right. Yes.
At the time, I really needed to lean on a goddess energy instead of a god energy. And I probably still lean that way. and, um, and some people really got uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. And at some point, somebody, I'm not sure if she was invited to start participating. She wasn't part of the group originally, and she was kind of considered a leader in this group. And she started to show up every single time with lots of judgment and would shake her head at me and point and wag her finger
Oh,
and would tell me, nope, it is time for you to be, um, you have to follow this to the word or
no,
you're not doing
no.
it right. And I
Oh,
said, that's not why I'm here.
no. That's such,
and,
I,
and if that's what, if you think I'm doing this wrong because I'm not saying this verbatim the way it's written that suits you better, um, and you need me to be all, military about this, I'm out. Like, because that's not what works.
it's
So
a
it was
conversation.
interesting to
Yeah.
stand up for myself there.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was it was a
So
really
good.
interesting place.
Right. So powerful. I've had this conversation so often because people say, in my tradition where they use God as God's own pronoun, right? And they try and say they're not going to use he, but they do all the time anyway. Um, and I say goddess out in the world,
Yeah.
because because people will say, well, but God is gender neutral. Right. In the same way that unisex shirts are gender neutral. No, they're just men's shirts, right? That are called gender neutral. God is just a phrase that
Unisex
it
shirts. Yeah,
carries.
unisex t-shirts are definitely
They're
just
male
men's
cut,
t-shirts. Yeah.
right? And so no, don't claim that just because you use God and don't use a he pronoun that you've done the work you need to do. Why are you so afraid of goddess, right? Do you know what the only reproductive body part ascribed to God is in the Bible? The womb of God. It's not the
Mhm.
penis of God or the balls of God. It's the womb of God, right? That's it. So let's see the goddess, right? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's use she and her and they and them. Let's use all of it
Yeah, absolutely.
and challenge and stand up for yourself to that judgment. Oh, that tisk, 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 oof. That's what I judge judgment people. That's the only people I judge.
Yeah.
So,
And we don't want to add fuel to any fire.
mm-mm.
It and it takes a lot of energy.
That's-
So um what advice do you have for allies?
um, it's one of the difficulties I have that I see is so many allies, cis allies for trans, cis het for queer. They want to be there for the pity story. Oh, it's so hard. I'm so sad. And you should be. Yes, you should be. And also celebrate too. celebrate. We are meant to celebrate together. So
Yeah.
how do you celebrate? How do you lift our voices? Who do you follow and routinely repost on social media? Who are you sharing in book club? Who are you talking about when you're with friends? Say, hey, I saw this woman, right? She was talking to on the Be the Glitter podcast, and I just thought it was such a great post concept, right? Instead of this trans woman, name me as a woman first, right? Yes, I am trans. Don't erase my transness. Don't say, oh, well, you're just like any woman. It's like, yes, I am like any woman because we are all women. And also, I am trans. Listen to us, right?
Yeah.
Hear us all. Center, especially, right? If you're going to claim allyship and you don't have Black trans women in your feed and your radar under your list,
Yeah.
then do better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can find us.
Yep.
Amara Jones from um, Trans Lash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is an amazing woman. There's so many more. Find
So
us
many. Yeah. Yep.
and give money, right? Give money to
And who are
people,
you
help
hiring?
fund, right?
Who are
Exactly.
you
Who are you
hiring?
hiring? Who are you making space for? Who are you allowing to make you uncomfortable? Because uncomfort is a place of growth if you let yourself sit there sometimes.
Hmm. That's a really good point as well. So how can we help you?
Um, Follow
What
me
do you need?
on, on my TikTok. It's also on Instagram and Facebook at Via-Etta Steel. Right?
Hmm.
I'm working on starting a business. So pay attention. And if you have resources or know people with resources, do what you can there. Right?
Hmm.
If you don't have financial resources, you have social resources, tell stories, share stories, repost stories. There's so many ways that are very simple, but stay tuned in, right?
Hmm.
Stay
Hmm.
tuned in. Follow, Be the Glitter too, because you're bringing amazing messages forward. And don't just watch passively. Push the like, right? Subscribe, repost, do the comment, right? Do the actions because those matter too.
Thank you.
So,
I'm so
yes,
grateful for you.
so good.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing your love and your wisdom and your energy. It's so needed. It's so necessary right now. And if there's anything else I can do to help you, please let me know.
just keep falling in love, right?
Just keep.
Each day, just keep falling in love.
I
That's
love
how
that
we do it.
assignment.
See? All right, love you.
I love you too. Mwah,
Bye
mwah,
bye.
mwah. Bye.